Welcome to the Internet, your gateway to adventure.
I will never forget the day I lost my brother. All I heard was a bang, followed by a thud. He had shot himself in the head on the edge of his bed and fell over onto the floor. I did everything I learned in CPR class to revive him, but it was no use. I collapsed against the bed, covered in his blood, crying. He was too young, only 14 years old. I wish he told me what was going on. I called 911 distraught, and help arrived eventually, but they told me what I already knew. He was gone. February 3rd, 1998 was the day he left us. To say it has gotten easier as time went on would be a complete lie, especially for my parents. I left for college in the year 2000, out of state, and every summer I'd come home to stay with my parents. Every summer for 4 years was the same. I'd come home, get a summer job for a few months before the start of the next year. The only rule was I was never to go into Jason's room, not by any circumstance. I wondered why, but I shrugged it off as just them not wanting to remember what happened. I understood it. One night during my junior year in college, late at night while everyone else was sleeping, I slowly opened the door to Jason's room because my curiosity got the best of me. It was just the way it was the day he died. There was still a stain on the floor and on the edge of the bed where he shot himself, but everything else was the same. His toys, his clothes, posters, games, etc. It was all still there. It reminded me of the movie Stand By Me, when the father kept his dead son's room the same as it was. He refused to move on, much like my parents. I understood why they left it the way it was. They just wanted to keep his memory alive. I love Jason. I still do, but I needed to move on because that's what Jason would have wanted me to do. I closed the door and turned around to go to bed, but I was stopped by my father, almost in a trance.
"What did I tell you about going into Jason's room, Justin?"
he said sternly as he started to corner me against a wall. I apologized profusely and made a lie about how I just wanted one last look at his room. It worked, I guess, because my dad embraced me in a hug and cried on my shoulder. Everything was fine. I went to bed and never appeared in his room again. It's been 11 years since I graduated college, and truth be told, my relationship with my parents has deteriorated ever since Jason killed himself. I was never the favorite of the family. You know, the middle child who always got shafted. My older sister, Jessica, was a drug addict, but was always still Daddy's little girl. Jason, the youngest, was always the baby, and, well, then there's me, Justin, the middle child with the attitude. I'm not here to cry or whatnot, but I haven't spoken to Jessica in probably 16 years, and my parents never returned my calls. I stopped caring after a while and moved on with my life. I met my wife, Abigail, while in college, and we have a son, whom I named Jason, after my brother. Life was good, up until about 2 months ago, when I received a call from the Boulder Police Department. They told me that there has been an accident, and my parents were dead. They didn't tell me what happened until I practically pried it out of them. My parents had killed themselves. Gunshots to the head. I didn't cry, nor did I react accordingly. I was silent, but I made sure to do whatever the authorities told me. I went back home to Boulder for the funeral, where I saw Jessica for the first time since before I left for college. She was off drugs, married, and had 4 kids of her own. Her husband, Ben, was a very nice guy, and it was good to see Jessica healthy again. The funeral was a happy ceremony, and it was good to remember the good times my parents had. I guess the depression of Jason's death, as well as financial issues, caused them both to take their own lives. We held the arrangements after the funeral at a local hotel lobby because no one wanted to go into that home that saw the death of 3 innocent people. Everyone was starting to leave to head back home, but Jessica and her family stayed over. We had the unfortunate task to go back to the house and start getting belongings from it. Just opening the door back into that house sent chills down my spine and brought back many bad memories. Don't get me wrong, there were good memories too, but the bad memories will always forever stand out from the good. I was in charge of the upstairs area, which had my old room, my parents' room, and Jason's room. When I was searching through my parents' room, I found a single cassette tape in the drawer next to the bed, as well as a cassette player. Now, this is 2016. Why would there be a cassette player here? Out of curiosity, I put the cassette in and hit play, but all I heard was static. Static, nothing else. Static. I turned it off and put it in the box with the rest of their belongings and finished packing their room. I went to clean out my old room, but to my surprise, it was already done. My room was completely empty, as if no one ever lived there. The dark green shag carpet was gone, replaced with hardwood flooring. I opened the door to Jason's room, and it was still the same as I remembered it all those years ago, completely unchanged. I wanted to donate his old toys to Goodwill or the Salvation Army. Next to Jason's bed was his nightstand, and inside the first drawer was a cassette tape, as well as a cassette player. Again, out of curiosity, I played the cassettes, but it was the same thing as in my parents' room. Static. They were old. Perhaps they just couldn't be played anymore. I shrugged it off, threw it in a box, and made my way out of the room. My family and I met up with Jessica and hers for breakfast the next day. It was a good day, and it was nice to really sit down with my sister and hear how she's been. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and they all had to leave back for home, as did my family. I donated all of Jason's old toys to charity, as well as any items my parents had that weren't a family heirloom or whatnot. I kept the cassette players for whatever reason. I found myself listening to the cassettes over and over again, hoping to hear something else besides static, but to no avail. All it ever was static. Just fucking static. I realized I was being crazy. So I threw away the cassettes and cassette player and moved on with my life. 2 weeks ago, my life changed again, but not for the better. I had returned home from work and called my wife, but no one answered. Her car was there, but she did not answer me. When I went to check on her, I found her dead body lying in a pool of blood, a single gunshot wound to her head. I dropped to my knees and did everything I could to make her breathe, but she was gone. I called 911 and sat on the edge of our bed, covered in her blood, my hands in my face, sobbing. When the police arrived, they took me in for questioning, which I knew would happen. I told them my story. I came home, found her dead on the floor. My work corroborated my story, and I was no longer suspect in foul play. I had to explain to my son that Mommy was gone, and Jesus Christ, it was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I'm just so thankful he was with my wife's sister at the time of the suicide because the last thing I wanted was to have him walk in on her the same way I walked in on Jason all those years ago. I've lost my brother, my parents, and my wife within the span of 20 years. My parents and my wife within the span of a month. Somehow, I stayed strong for my son, and the funeral was harder than I imagined. I loved Abigail with all of my heart, and I fucking wish I knew why she did what she did. After the funeral, I returned home and went into our room and closed the door. I sat on the bed, looking down at the maroon stain that will never come out, and I just cried. I cried like I had never cried before. I reached into my side drawer of my nightstand to get a tissue when I found a cassette and cassette player. I popped in the cassette and heard static. It's always static.